continuing thoughts on this. So this isn't, going to be a big timing thing. I'm less interested in the whole thing as a clock or anything like that. That is more of the whole territory that May was going over, so I'm not encroaching on that. But I wanted to just, I have been actually reading the Divine Comedy, coming in handy for the last 2 years, and I'm currently at the beginning of Paradise, because I'm determined to it's taken me this long because I'm determined to get every single reference, and I'm still not getting every single reference, but I'm doing a lot of reading, deep reading of each canto, to make sure I really get it. And so that is why this is all coming out, because as I'm reading, I keep thinking of more things. And just having a deep knowledge of the Taylor Swift oeuvre, and also an art history degree, so I'm prone to visual analysis, and I'm also an astrology girly, so I'm obsessed with astrology and also mythology since forever. But I have been hardcore studying astrology since 2018. But I've always been deep in the Greek mythology life. And also deep in the Renaissance life, because I studied Italian Renaissance art history. Dante is a little earlier than usually. I did mostly 1400s and 1500s and some 1600s, but Dante's a little bit earlier. He's the late, sort of late 1200s, early 1300s. But a lot of the Florence stuff is the same, and there's even similar families, and so I've been learning more about that. So that's my stream of consciousness going on. So I wanted to come and talk about Lavender Haze. I've been having some more thoughts about the Lavender Haze music video. And also, given the recent visual of the Karma remix, having her in space really looks very paradisey to me, as well as she keeps saying the Till Daylight remix and all of that. It's very paradise vibes. So I wanted to go back and talk about some things I had been thinking about from the Lavender Haze music video. One I had been thinking about was the incense. There's I was thinking about Lavender Haze music video as a sort of showing her journey from paradise, from purgatory into paradise. And so what was made me think about purgatory first was there's this incense theme of this incense burning. And then she's also dancing with this incense, this lavender haze incense, lavender haze smoke. And that made me think of the Terrace of Pride in Purgatory, where there's this sort of multimedia situation where he talks about these engraved sort of reliefs. He's engraved different virtues on these different stones that are around the circle of the mountain. And I think Pride is just the second level of the Terrace of Purgatory. And so he has a picture of David, King David from the Bible. And he is this example. Why can't I talk? He's an example of not letting pride go to your head. He's an example of someone not falling prey to the sin of pride. And in that there's this apparently famous, example from the Bible in which he is dancing. He starts dancing with the peasants and incense, and he's having a grand old time. And his wife is upset because she thinks it's not dignified for someone of his stature to be hooting and hollering like that. So anyway, that reminded me of it, and it's he goes into all this multi-sensory detail about there's all this incense that he can smell that's going on while he's somehow transported to that moment of being in that scene while Dante is walking by this sculpture that's moving and also making him smell all this incense, and it's he's completely transported into this weird virtual reality. So that reminded me of that. And then also it's the flame that starts the smoke coming. She lights this at the beginning. She lights a match, and that's what starts all the smoke, the lavender smoke. And so that reminded me of the idea of at the end of Purgatory, he and Statius have to go, who's this poem, he meets this guy, Statius, who is a Roman poet, who, and he comes out of this, he's finally finished all of his, like, burning off of his sins in Purgatory, and there's, like, a big earthquake on the mountain of Purgatory, and he's like, surprise, it's me. But I am not the problem. So Dante and Statius kind of bop along, and Virgil, who's also with them, can't. They have like this intense bromance for like 2 cantos, and they can't. Virgil can't go into heaven because he is not a Christian. But Statius was a secret Christian, so he can go into paradise. So him and Dante go through this, and Dante is technically a Christian, even though he's like wildly heretical against the church. He still is was baptized and all of that. To be fair, Virgil didn't have much of a chance, but he was technically contemporaneous with Jesus in this schema. So whatever, that's a whole other topic. But they go through this big purifying fire at the end of Purgatory. They have to like walk through this massive wall of fire. So that reminded me of this fire. And then she's walking through these fields in her apartment, turning into flowers that burst up from the ground, which is unbelievable visual, let's just gotta say, and inspired my personal this, and also the flower imagery from the lakes inspired my own personal Arrows outfit. And so this reminded me of the earthly paradise, which is like right at the end of Purgatory, which is like he right before he goes into paradise, but he's like at the top of the mountain of Purgatory. It's basically the Garden of Eden. So it's like this idea that humans could have always been in this awesome, awesome garden if we hadn't had original sin, which is something I have a lot of feelings about that I can go into in a different video. But he ends up in this like completely paradise, and he sees this woman, this complete paradise. He sees this woman picking all these flowers, and it turns out to be Matilda and not Beatrice, as you would think. So the flower, and I think it's really the only time he even talks about flowers in the entire poem, I believe. I've been trying to remember if maybe he talks about nature a little bit in the Valley of the Princes. I don't know, which is earlier in Purgatory. He definitely talks about trees, but he doesn't talk about flowers, I don't think, like really any other time. So that's significant. And there's nowhere is there like this lush, gorgeous paradise anywhere else. So that's very deliberate. I think floral imagery. Matilda is picking flowers, and also he also has this dream right before he's about to enter this sort of top of paradise. He has a dream about Rachel and Leah, and Rachel and Leah from the Bible. And he has a dream of them. Rachel is looking in the mirror, and she's like this idea of complete self-referral, complete self-contained divinity. And then Leah is seen gathering flowers, and she's this like complete symbol of action. So it's like in the Veda, it's called Gyan Yogi and Kriya Yogi, or Gyan Shakti and Kriya Shakti. So it's like ascending and gaining enlightenment through knowledge, or versus gaining enlightenment through action, which you can also do. You do not have to be a monk. So that's interesting too. And then, of course, going into the Persephone theme that MC was starting to allude to, there's also the idea that Persephone / Proserpina / Kore, some of her names, was picking flowers before she was abducted by Pluto. That's a whole other topic that I'll get into. MC will probably cover, but I also have a lot of thoughts on that. But let me stop this because it's about 10 minutes.